Thank you. Thank you. So glad to be here and so glad to hear so many people use the graph. Let's get started. So, as you may know, the graph is a default part of the stack. So we are both the API layer and the indexing layer. So we currently have something called a hosted service and also the decentralized network that we've been working on for over 4 years now. But the subgraph itself is our branded API. It can be composable, open source. You can fork others that are existing and make it your own. We consider ourselves a global API, so you can build a subgraph for any use case, whether it's for a DAO, a DApp, entertainment, social, it really doesn't matter. Any kind of data can be indexed in a subgraph, and like I said, you can fork existing subgraphs. So some of the most exciting subgraphs we've seen are ones, for example, the Uniswap subgraph being forked and redesigned for the protocol that also may have forked Uniswap or adjusted their smart contracts. So I want to get clear on the difference between the hosted service and the network. So the hosted service launched over 4 years ago. It was intended for product market fit. So we launched the Subgraph standard, which is the API, and we really knew what the problem we were solving was, which is people need, and developers need a way to access rich data in their UI, and it's very hard to do that yourself. It really doesn't make sense for a DApp team that's focused on product to also have a DevOps team that's focused on maintaining your server, your database. And so the hosted service was the hosted alternative, but there are centralized dependencies. The reason we're all here in Web3 is to remove those dependencies. So we've been very transparent from the get-go that the decentralized network was the goal. There's no interaction with GRT on the hosted service, and the hosted service already supports 39 networks. So this is every EVM chain you can think of, testnets, etc. And now is our chance to go from the hosted service supporting all of these to the actual network supporting these. The decentralized network has over 185 node operators today. So node operators in the network are indexers. They run graph node. They're doing the hard work, serving the queries. They're also the ones that earn GRT. And in addition to indexers, there are curators and delegators who can also earn GRT by staking on subgraphs or staking on indexers. So really creating a self-sufficient economy where you don't need a centralized team like a hosted service to tell you which API is high quality. You can have people in the community signal on those subgraphs, stake GRT on those subgraphs, and by doing so, indexers, the node operators, know which subgraphs are highest priority. So you can imagine something like a Uniswap subgraph or maybe Radical, some of the most used subgraphs, see the most signal because they're built by some of the highly trusted teams, and so indexers will then pick up those subgraphs and prioritize them. The other thing about the decentralized network is that we already have 450 subgraphs that have already migrated, but really this effort over the next year or so is to migrate every single subgraph that's still on the hosted service to the network. Just a highlight of some of the dApps that have migrated. And what's really exciting is that we're seeing a lot of these dApps have multi-chain subgraphs. So they've deployed themselves on different chains. So all of these so far are just on Ethereum. So really exciting to see that traction. And as we go multi-chain, every dApp can also continue migrating. So the plan to sunset the hosted service is Q1 2023, by end of Q1, and we're doing this in phases. So by the end of Q3, all Ethereum subgraphs you will not be able to deploy a new Ethereum subgraph on the hosted service, and by end of Q4, you won't be able to upgrade or make any changes. And the point of this is we're creating a phased approach to ensure that developers are feeling comfortable with the network, able to migrate, get the support they need, and also can continue serving their dApps. So we really want to make sure we're not leaving anyone stranded and giving everyone plenty of time to actually migrate their subgraphs over. Like I said, we already support 39 chains, and we're adding new ones, every month. Most recently, we added Arweave support and Cosmos Hub. Arweave support isn't fully finished. We still don't have full support for files, but the goal is that really any chain, like I said, EVM or not, will be supported on the network as well. So MIPS. you might have heard of this, but this is basically our next step into enabling multi-chain on the network. MIPS is our incentivized program that we just launched called Migration Infrastructure Providers. And the goal here is that not only do Subgraph developers need time to get comfortable with migrating, but indexers do too. And we recognize that not every indexer today that runs Ethereum will run every other chain. So we've created this program that over the next 6 months or so, any chain node operator, regardless of which chain it is, can join this program, be incentivized to run an indexer, and help us test and create the best network, most performant network for dApps. So really excited to share that we have 50 million GRT allocated to this program. We expect hundreds of node operators to participate. We've already had over 500 register. Let's hope they actually sync their nodes. We all know that can be a challenge. And the program launches September 20th. So really excited to see that over the next 6 months, we're going to see hundreds of node operators, often or likely new node operators, ones that currently aren't indexers, participate. And really what this means is node operators, if you're running a Gnosis node or you're running an Optimism node, you can now also run an indexer. This wasn't really possible over the last 2 years as we gave our indexers in the network time to be self-sufficient on Ethereum, working out any kinks. But now this means that if you're running a node for that chain, you can also support the dApp ecosystem. Whereas maybe previously you were running the node for mining purposes or whatever else it might be, really indexers are the backbone to supporting dApps, so those dApps don't need to run the nodes themselves. And really excited to share that Gnosis Chain is the first chain that's being supported on the network. Let's hear a round of applause for Gnosis. So exciting. And the reason we started with Gnosis was, firstly, we think that Gnosis is incredibly aligned with the graph ecosystem. The values of decentralization, EVM-based, very easy and user-friendly for nodes to be run. And we also think that the ecosystem in the Gnosis chain world is really full of dApp developers. So we want to make sure that any dApps that are on Gnosis chain can have the opportunity to migrate immediately. And again, if you have dApps across many chains, as the new chains flow out, you'll be able to migrate that subgraph too. So the process for our MIPS program will be a loop per chain. Basically, our intention is that indexers can set up their infrastructure, prepare the chain, so sync their node. We're also in talks with all of the chain foundations to make sure that we can get snapshots or whatever is needed to make it as easy as possible for you guys to run those nodes. Start doing some stress testing on Gurley. We recently migrated our testnet to Gurley. Beginning the actual migration to the network, so that might be testing some of the subgraphs queries, testing the gateway on our testnet, and then eventually monitoring quality of service on the network. At that point, when we have high quality of service, we have enough indexers serving, then we'll start migrating production dApps to the network. So it's really important to us that dApps aren't migrating to the network and don't feel, again, like they're stranded if the indexers aren't ready themselves, and we take that very seriously. We think that, again, the graph is kind of the solution to make sure your dApp is fully decentralized, so we want to make sure there's enough node operators that can provide you that quality of service. We also have what we call, I don't know if I'm going to butcher this name, Dijkstra, which is our L2 testnet. So we are deploying on Arbitrum to make sure we can have scalability in the network. This is really important for indexers as well as Subgraph developers to make sure costs are low. And so indexers that choose to help out and participate in that testing forum can do so. And then every indexer will be able to earn rewards based on their participation. So really encourage you, if you run a Gnosis node, to start syncing. The program starts September 20th. And then new chains will be rolled out every few weeks. We expect 4 to 6 weeks per chain, but really that's dependent on how node operators behave, what challenges they see, how long migration takes, et cetera. So really the goals of this MIPS program are to test the network. So, like I said, testing the gateway, L2, all of these critical components that we've only seen with Ethereum. So that's one chain. And as you add more chains, it increases the complexity for the indexers themselves. Expanding multi-chain. So of course, supporting all the dApps that currently use the graph on the network itself. And we think this is really important because, Ethereum is, obviously the first and maybe the largest ecosystem. But again, we know that many dApps have deployed across chains. So we want to make sure you're not having half your subgraph on the hosted service and half on the network, but having them all migrate at the same time. And then, of course, migrating your subgraph over. And the end goal is that all dApps across chains should be fully decentralized. We shouldn't be building for one chain. This is a multi-chain universe. We believe in being chain agnostic. Although we are built on Ethereum, we want to make sure everyone is supported in Web3. A few stats on where we're at today. So like I said, we have 185 indexers already on the network. We've got nearly 10,000 delegators, which is incredible. Delegators are folks that have GRT. They don't want to do all the work of setting up an indexer, but they still want to participate. And so they delegate their GRT to the indexers. And what that does for indexers is it actually increases their capacity to serve the network. So there's a multiplier on their ability to serve and allocate to subgraphs, and that's also based on their delegation. So, for example, if you are a GRT holder and you don't want to run an indexer, the best thing you can do is delegate, and you can also earn rewards from the network. Curators, like I said, are the folks that signal on the subgraph. So this is very important because you don't know which subgraph is high quality, maybe with touch to the wind, but otherwise the point is that indexers follow curators to know which subgraphs are most important. And what's really exciting about the curator role is that the intent is for the subgraph developer to be the first curator. So every subgraph has a bonding curve. So obviously the earlier that you're able to signal, the better it is for you. And the intent is that the subgraph developer, the one building it or maintaining it, is able to curate instantly. And so as the subgraph gains more usage, the bonding curve works in their favor, and they can earn more rewards over time. And lastly, we have 466 subgraphs already migrated. Very exciting, but not enough. So we strongly believe that multi-chain is not only for the dApps that are building on that chain, but in itself, creating multi-chain capabilities really enables Web3 to be what it is, meaning you don't want to have your infrastructure split across different infrastructures. You don't want to have an inconsistent experience for your developers. And so we think that once you actually have multi-chain in a fully decentralized way, you can have completely new use cases that maybe weren't possible before because the UX or difficulty of doing that was just too high. Let me just go back. So Topdaps are already powered by the Graph Network. This is, again, just Ethereum today, but anything from websites that are a bit more static, like a Web3 index or a snapshot, to NFTs and DAOs. Juicebox DAO actually is especially my favorite because if you all remember Constitution DAO, and I don't know if anyone participated, but at the time of Constitution DAO's peak, they were actually running their own server. I think they might have even been hosting their own subgraph, and they couldn't handle the load that they were actually forced to migrate to the decentralized network in the middle of the auction because their website kept going down. So that's a really great example of how the network itself can be more resilient than any centralized service because you don't have to maintain it yourself. There's no central point of failure. And just like Ethereum, where you expect at least one node operator to always serve those blocks, same here. You always expect at least one indexer to want to serve your queries. And if, for example, your queries are too complex or there might be some reason that it's not as attractive, the indexer can also set their query prices. So everything is very dynamic. And we expect that for dApps themselves, this is exciting because you aren't paying maybe one giant subscription fee that you don't know how that's bundled up or you don't know how those costs are attributed. You get to pay per query here. So you'll have a fairly consistent price per month, but it'll be based on the queries that you are actually experiencing, not some larger tier. So the best thing that you can do is begin migrating your subgraph if you haven't already done so. It's actually quite simple. We are improving documentation and we have a lot of support engineers, but otherwise, it's free for all. You can do it yourself. Firstly, you publish the subgraph on the network itself. So if you already have a subgraph on the hosted service, this is very simple. It's just a toggle in the studio. Then you signal GRT on the subgraph. So like I said, subgraph developers are really the ones that can benefit the most from signaling early. Create an API key, copy that URL, and then migrate your endpoint. And it's very easy. And the great thing, again, about the network, because it's open, permissionless, and the subgraphs are open source as well, is that once you migrate your subgraph, anyone else can benefit from it. So you actually, as the developer, don't even need to be the one to migrate it. If someone else wants to migrate your subgraph, they can too. But again, the goal is that the benefit is huge here for everyone. We, as the Graph Foundation, also have a lot of migration grants. So if you are a dApp or a developer that needs help migrating your subgraph, we're giving out grants to help you bootstrap that experience. So bootstrap your initial signal, some of your initial costs, and to actually walk you through that in our white glove service. So I don't know if anyone heard about Subgraphdal. We launched this sort of subtly, but the community has launched the second DAO in the Graph ecosystem. We have the Advocates DAO already, which is a community DAO focused on community grants. And the Subgraph DAO is focused on all things migration and Subgraph support. So really the goal was, how do we create an environment where you can, in a decentralized way, support the community so it isn't the Graph Foundation or one of the core developers that has to help out. So firstly, migration support. This can be anything from taking calls to literally helping you migrate, demoing, sharing screen, pair programming, whatever you need. Subgraph QA and testing. So one of the things we've seen in scaling Subgraph development is that, sometimes people are brand new, they don't know all the best practices, they build a Subgraph that has issues, or maybe it doesn't sync as efficiently as it should. They come back to us saying, what's wrong with you guys? Why isn't your Subgraph working? Hey, you actually could have built it maybe a little more efficiently. So we want to make sure that the Subgraph DAO creates a community of Subgraph developers that can actually do quality assurance of each other's Subgraphs. And we've already started this process of interviewing folks who feel that they're senior enough to take on that role and actually be mentors for others. Subgraph standards. So this is really exciting for me personally because what we've seen a lot of is people forking subgraphs or creating similar versions, but they all follow very different standards. And that makes it very challenging for Dapp developers to then build really dynamic apps. It takes more time to understand what type of subgraph you're using, how to integrate it. And so Misari, one of our core subgraph developers, is actually building standards across all protocols. They started with DeFi lending, and so they're trying to create a standard schema that all DeFi lending protocols could follow. And that way it makes it much easier for a DeFi dApp to be able to actually integrate. And we'll see more of this, but the goal here is to have working groups really figure out what are the standards that dApps need per category. So in DeFi, NFTs, DAOs, et cetera. Migration grants and bounties. So like I said, we have a lot of migration grants, but we also are hoping the Subgraphdal can do what we're calling migration bounties for facilitating the migration. So this is, if you know of a subgraph that needs to be migrated, maybe that team doesn't have the capacity, but you want to help them, you can earn a grant or a bounty for actually migrating the subgraph over. So again, we're really scaling in a decentralized way to make sure that there isn't one individual who's an expert. And the goal here is that those folks that help you migrate can then also continue helping you. Maybe you hire them eventually, maybe you have an ongoing grant, but you don't have to take on all that work, again, because we are in an open source ecosystem. And lastly, Subgraph grants themselves. So every quarter, we fund probably around $100,000 worth of grants to actual Subgraph developers for building their Subgraphs, maintaining them, creating new things. Sometimes it's tooling, and the Subgraphdal will be taking those over long term. So really, our goal is to remove the foundation core devs from this process as much as possible to make it as easy for you as possible too. And coming soon, so in addition to us expanding Multichain, we've got a lot of work going on that can help those on Multichain, but really anybody building on the graph. So number one is substreams. This is work coming out of Streaming Fast, one of our core developers, which enables parallel data processing. So we're hoping for up to 100x greater efficiency in data streaming. And the difference here is that the data model is actually quite different. Whereas the subgraph follows a schema, the goal with the substreams is that you can just define, maybe it's all Uniswap token pairs and stream that data, and eventually you can actually have the subgraph consume that substream as well. So the goal is to actually open up different use cases here. We know a lot of folks actually use subgraphs for their routing algorithms or non-UI use cases, so not just querying the subgraph for their dApp. And we hope that substreams can actually make that much more feasible. L2 scaling, so like I said, we're incorporating Arbitrum in the network. This is part of the MIPS program as well, so if you're very interested in testing this, please join. Shell proofs, also incredibly exciting. We announced this at Graph Day, and shell proofs are a new efficient snark that are being built by our snark force. It's two to three core dev teams coming together, working on a snark, and the goal is to use this for verifiable queries and indexing. So the graph right now, migrating to the decentralized network, we still have some manual components where arbitration occurs, with a group of people. But the goal is that all arbitration or governance can occur in a verifiable way. So over the next few years, you'll see verifiable queries, verifiable indexing coming out. And this also has impacts on EIP 4.4s, where you can use the graph as the verifiable solution for querying historical data instead of using a full node. And lastly, gateway optimization. So we know that The network is only as decentralized as the actual stack of the network. We've done a lot of work to make the gateway more efficient, so to make it actually more efficient in querying, also the processing of the transactions, and the goal is to keep adding those features and expanding to more gateways. We really hope that eventually everyone can run a gateway. We're on the path to light clients, but for now, just getting more out there and making sure everyone feels good about how they can access their data in a decentralized network is most important. And that's it. We're going multi-chain. We're so excited about it. We already support chains on the hosted service, but the true vision of supporting on the network is coming true. Thank you.
Woohoo! This is cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I think we have time for maybe a couple questions, but let's make it snappy. Let's do it. There was one, right? Sorry.
So sorry for the gentleman in the front. I took the mic first. In going multi-chain, is it just about indexing, or do you also plan to move your contracts, like the bounding curve and all that, to a layer 2? Because interacting with the Subgraph contract on mainnet is in my opinion, one of the biggest barriers to people adopting the decentralized network.
Yeah, great question. So going multi-chain is supporting new chains on the network, but like I mentioned, we are expanding to layer 2, and Arbitrum is the network that we're expanding to. So part of the MIPS program will include testing because this is brand new. Again, there's obviously been a lot of hacks and whatnot in the past with layer 2 bridges, and so we want to take the opportunity to make sure that's tested well before it goes in production.
Thank you. And there was a question over here.
Yeah. Actually, this was also the question that I wanted to ask, but I have another one. Do I understand correctly that also the indexers for the other chains that are going to index, not only Ethereum, what do you expect them to be? Do you think there will be those who are running the nodes for different chains, or it will be, for example, let's say people are running the archive nodes for the blockchain itself, and they will also be running the nodes for indexers of the graph?
Yeah, so that would be the goal. Because we've been on Ethereum only the last 2 years, most of our indexers are Ethereum centric. And so the goal is right now, as we roll out a new chain, that the node operators, who are the experts, so if you're running Gnosis Chain right now, please join us, to actually run GraphNode as well. There's maybe a bit of a learning curve. You have to deploy GraphNode, you have to work out some kinks, but you guys are the experts. And we also think that the ones that are running the nodes for that chain are actually most incentivized to continue supporting that ecosystem too. So, really, it's not for the graph, it's for the dApps in that ecosystem. So we want to make sure that all Gnosis dApps have enough indexers that are supporting them. But really, anyone who wants to run a Gnosis chain, especially because it's so easy, can do that.
Okay, so basically, it's going to be more, you think, vertical than horizontal. So indexers will be the ones who also running the nodes of the blockchain itself, and not let's say the indexer who's running the indexer nodes for different chains like Ethereum, Gnosis, and all that. Of course, it can be both ways, but do you have any statistics on that, or what is the expected way?
Yeah, great question. Because we're just starting out, we don't know the stats there. I expect that for some, like Gnosis, we will see overlap because they're EVM-based, it's fairly easy. I expect maybe for something like Near, we won't see as many current Ethereum indexers running Near, just because that's not their bread and butter. But the cool thing is that all indexers get to choose. So you really get to choose whichever chain you want to run. And then also, depends on the cost and economics, because you as an indexer are earning from the network. A lot of what we're seeing is indexers choosing which chain they want to run based on the economics that they foresee. So for example, Polygon, notoriously hard to run, more expensive. However, it's one of the most used chains. And so we could see, the indexers who are willing to maybe have a larger setup will do that. But really, I'm excited to see what happens. So yes, I hope to show next, data maybe next DappCon.
Got it. Yeah, thank you.
Super cool. Last question. Is there a Dapp node Dapp app that I can run for an indexer or something like that?
I would love a Dapp node.
I know.
Graph node.
That would be super cool.
Yeah.
Super easy.
What are we waiting for? I don't know.
I don't know. Guys, it's going to do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.